Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. My name is Caroline Colas, and I am the Senior Director of Health and Wellness at the Marlene Meyerson JCC Manhattan. And I am also your host on the Positive Psychology Hour. And today on the Positive Psychology Hour, a series that we do in partnership with the Whole Being Institute, we are going to be talking about diving deeper, how to harness fear, flight, and failure. Scott Simon, the author of and founder of the Scare Your Soul movement, is in the house, and he is back to talk to us about overcoming fear, strategies for how to do that, and stepping out of our comfort zone so that we can lead a more audacious and flourishing life. It is 2023, so, in the new year, January, so it's time to look at how we can ground in positive psychology and look at a growth mindset coupled with some intentional action that can lead to greater optimism, life satisfaction, well-being, gratitude, forgiveness, energy, and self-confidence, all of those things by understanding our fear and perhaps even chasing it, which is, I know, something that Scott does. I want to tell you a little bit about him so you know. He is a happiness entrepreneur, speaker, and founder of the Scare Your Soul movement, an inspiring individual who is really about activating global change through small acts of courage. He has spoken around the world, motivated people at schools, companies, given a TEDx talk, co-founded a happiness incubator, and studied and worked with international thought leaders in the areas of courage and happiness. And he's a high-performance coach focusing primarily on creating flourishing lives post-divorce. He also leads mindfulness meditations and has served as an officiant of numerous weddings. He earned his BA from Skidmore, his MA from Case Western, and has certificates in positive psychology from the Whole Being Institute. He's the father of 2 children, and when not out fulfilling his sense of wanderlust, he lives in Cleveland, Ohio, and that is where he is calling from now. Scott, welcome to the call. Thank you for coming back, and thank you especially for talking to us today about the anatomy of fear.
Yes. Caroline, thank you so much. And it's so good to be back with all of you. I had an absolute blast speaking to all of you in December. It seems like it was ages ago. And I'm so happy to talk to you about something that I think, if you look at our world today, is probably the most compelling, most important thing that any of us can do, and that is to act courageously in our own lives. This has been a passion of mine, and I'll talk a little bit about my background today and a little bit about Scare Your Soul, but I want to make sure that we really have time to dive deep today, to go into the psychology of fear, the psychology of courage, what it all means. And I'd like to give you some strategies, some hacks, if you will, that might help you as you are approaching moments of discomfort, moments of courage in your lives. This is my path, and it is one that is informed, as Caroline knows so well, by the field of positive psychology. So it is such a pleasure to be with all of you. I'd like to begin just by telling you all about a quick a story about something that happened to me just the other night. I have a book called Scare Your Soul that was published in December. It is the story of my life. It is the story of many other people's lives, and it's really the story of courage and what that means in small ways in our lives. And in December, I had a book launch that was a magical evening. 150 people came to my book launch, and it was powerful and meaningful. And after I left, I said, you know what? I want to do this again. I want to have another book launch locally in my hometown. So I booked an event. This particular event was at a bookstore. I live in Cleveland, Ohio, and there is a bookstore in Cleveland called Loganberry Books, which is, if you can imagine, almost something out of Game of Thrones or something like you're going back into medieval times. That is Loganberry Books. It is this gorgeous, amazing treasure trove of books. And I had a number of people sign up. It wasn't as large as my first event, but 30 or 40 people signed up, and I was thrilled to speak to them. And I had written, as many of you would if this were your event, an hour-long speech. I had it on note cards. I had it in the podium waiting, and I arrived early. I think I tried on 4 different outfits to somehow, to make myself comfortable for this event that was coming up. And I got there that night and was waiting for all these people to show up, and they did. And then as I am about to get to the podium, a transformer blew across the street and the lights went out in the bookstore. We were in a back room, and literally it was pitch dark. And people, of course, started to get nervous. They were wondering what was going on. And someone handed me a little LED lantern. And this is going to sound very metaphorical, and I wanted to land that way. I had a decision to make. We could either cancel the event and rebook it for another time, or we could continue on in this strange, unknowable environment. And I decided in that moment, let's do that. And so I grabbed one of these little LED lanterns and led the what was then probably a 20-minute book talk instead of an hour. I will tell you, it was one of the most memorable evenings I think I've ever had. And in my mind, a real metaphor for stepping into discomfort. Because when we lead lives that are growing, when we lead lives that are courageous, there will be moments where we don't have the outcome in mind. And I will tell you that I got so many emails and calls afterwards saying that this experience was so memorable for everybody. And I walked away really extra confirmed in my mind that the more that we are leading a vibrant, adventurous, courageous life, the more we're going to confront the unknown. And so that in many ways is what I'd love to talk to you about today. It is about confronting the unknown. It is about confronting what is most courageous in our own lives. I'd like to begin just by telling you a little bit about myself. I grew up here in Cleveland, Ohio, as the shortest, shyest kid in my grade. I was bullied growing up and led a very, very small existence. I basically wanted to be invisible for most of my life, certainly my early life. And for any of you who have experienced bullying, either in your own family or children, grandchildren, it's really insidious. It creates a lot of shame, and it actually makes you want to just recede into your life, not tell anybody. And that's exactly how I led the first half of my life. Very shy, very quiet, and in a lot of ways, very scared. And as Caroline knows, in 4th grade, I had an experience with a choir teacher. And for those of you who were on the prior call, this may be a little bit of a redo, but this was an essential moment in my life. I was preparing for a choir concert. Do you all remember choir concerts when you were growing up, and you would go onto those risers and prepare for, the songs that you would be singing in front of your family at holiday time? And this choir teacher asked me to sing a solo line in a song, the 76 Trombones from The Music Man. And each time the song came around to me, I choked up. I was so nervous and shy. And each time it got more uncomfortable, my voice choked up even more. And by the 3rd time, he stormed towards me and said, "You clearly cannot sing. Why don't you just mouth the words for the year?" I did not sing again for 35 years. And in the interim, I met a wonderful professor who was then at Harvard, Tal Ben-Shahar, many of you may know. I began to study the tenets of positive psychology, grew into my love of positive psychology. But this whole concept of pushing comfort zones, and for me, singing, stuck with me. It was almost like something on my shoulder that said, you just can't do this. You don't like it. You hate it. And so I decided one day that I was going to confront this demon. And I grabbed an acoustic guitar and I went to a busy restaurant on a Sunday morning and I sang in front of a group of strangers. I assure you, I was terrible. It was awful. My voice is not anything that anybody would want to hear in terms of a singing performance. But the feeling that I had afterwards was unquantifiable. It was this feeling of joy, of passion, of freedom. And that moment for me felt like a Scare Your Soul moment. I came home, wrote a Facebook post about that experience, and that Facebook post went viral. And what that really did was it invited people from around the world to say to me, I want to join you. I want to do something in my own life that is going to set me free, something in my own life that is going to speak to my sense of courage. And so I started to receive these many, many messages. I created an online community. Scare Your Soul now has 40 or 50 ambassadors worldwide, and thousands of participants every single week that follow our courage challenges. But the key is really, what does it mean in that moment to step into courage? And so that's really what I want to talk to you about today. And that's really, in many ways, what the book is all about. It is a tapestry of stories and of data and research, all about what makes us courageous in our own lives and how we deal with the fear that will be our dance partner through our entire lives. So I'd like to just ask you to consider the following. I have a card that sits on the end of my desk. It was given to me by my beloved co-parent, Laura, and it says the following: what would you attempt to do if you knew you could not fail? What would you attempt to do if you knew you could not fail? And I love this card. It's the sentiment is beautiful. And I have thought about it hundreds and hundreds of times. And to me, this is an essential question because it raises the idea of what would our lives look like if we didn't let fear stop us. And the environment and the modality of Scare Your Soul is focused on this key question: what would that life look like if we didn't let fear stop us? When I studied with Tal Ben-Shahar and really dug into positive psychology, I began to focus on many of the ideas that I'm sure all of you are very familiar with. We focused on the concept of a growth mindset, Carol Dweck, and what it means to have agency in your life, that we know that we can change, that by small actions, we know that we can shift our reality. That was a critical piece. The second was, how do we allow our brains to grow and change? This, of course, as many of you know, is the field of neuroplasticity. And this became part and parcel of the work that we're doing in Scare Your Soul. Because when you tackle small acts of courage and do it consistently, we actually change the pathways in our brain. And I'd like to tell you a quick story about neuroplasticity and the importance of retelling ourselves stories to repair past traumas. And then after we do that, I'd love to go into diving deeper some of the hacks and ways that we can actuate courage in our own lives. When I was 9 years old, I had an idol in my life. it was my cousin, Stephen. He was 3 years older than me, and he was funny and smart and good looking and brave, and everything about him just was the greatest. And I followed him everywhere, and he was so kind to me, brought me in and introduced me to all of his friends. And there was nobody better in my life than Stephen. When he was 14, he was crossing the street very close to where I live now, and was hit by a car and killed. And I remember it like it was yesterday, going to the funeral, spending time with my family, seeing people almost on the verge of fainting. It was the saddest, most powerful experience I had ever been through by that young age. And in losing my cousin, it did something to me. It changed my perspective of people crossing streets. He had been crossing a street when he was hit. And from that point forward, I was terrified of crossing streets myself. And certainly when I had my own children, the concept of them crossing streets would paralyze me. It was a past trauma that I just couldn't let go of. And a number of years later, I had gotten divorced and was living in a small apartment with my 2 kids. And whenever I would take them out, I wouldn't let them ride bikes. When I was pulling out or backing out, I would look 12 different times to make sure that everything was safe when crossing streets. And I decided at some point that when I was moving into a new house, that I would encourage my children to have friends over consistently. I really wanted them to have a place in my home where their friends could come over. And so just about every Friday night, my son, Noah, and my daughter, Tila, would invite their friends over, and I would make dinner for all of their friends. This was our Friday night tradition. One Friday night, my daughter, Tila, invited 5 or 6 friends over, and one of her friends was a beautiful, vivacious young girl named Sophie. Sophie was hilarious. She was one of those people who could converse with kids as much as they could converse with adults. And she just had such a beautiful, fun, vivacious spirit about her. And so I made a big taco dinner for everybody. All of these kids were around the house. A few of them were out front, playing in the front yard. And I was doing the dishes, and I heard a scream. I heard a scream from the front yard, and I ran out my front door. I skidded down my driveway in my bare feet, and I looked out onto the main road that adjoins my street, and I saw Sophie laying in the middle of the street. She had crossed it with another friend and had not made it back in time and was hit by an SUV. As you can imagine, the fear that came up in me was inestimable. I have never felt the kind of fear that I felt in that moment. And I ran out, sprinted into the middle of the street, and I stood over Sophie's body, laying in the middle of the street. And I put my hands out, the cars coming in both directions. And I ordered all of the kids back into the house and yelled to them to call 911. And then I stood. I just stood with my arms outstretched. And in that moment, I knew that I needed to protect her. I knew that this had happened yet again. Somebody had stepped into a street and was in danger. And so I stood with cars coming in both directions and my arms outstretched until an ambulance came. She was taken to the hospital, and when her injuries were challenging enough, they actually brought her to a larger hospital. And the next morning, I showed up, talked to her parents, and I gave them the biggest hug. And I said, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry that I wasn't there to protect your daughter. And they said, you did protect our daughter. And I thought about it and I replayed that moment over and over in my mind. And I realized in that moment, I did exert courage. I did protect Sophie. And it was the telling and retelling of that story that changed everything from within me. It changed everything about the way that I viewed people crossing streets. Now, I will tell you, Sophie is now a beautiful, vivacious college sophomore and is doing great. And she and I will be forever linked in this moment of deep courage, deep emotion. And so this critical nature, when we think about neuroplasticity and we think about the moments in our lives when there are changes, there are moments that test us. And if we can actually write them down, we can tell the story over and over again in our minds, we can actually seal it in. And from that moment, I knew that Sophie was saved and that I was healed from my past trauma. So that was a critical moment for me, a time when what Tal had taught me about neuroplasticity actually became part of me. And that is so much of why I love telling these stories and teaching these moments, because this is really what matters in our lives. I also learned deeply about the concept of fear. And I think we should spend a moment or two talking about what fear really is and what fear really means to us. If you Googled how to be fearless or how to eradicate fear, you will see hundreds of millions of hits. I encourage you to avoid them all. The reality is, fear is part of us. It is a primal emotion. It is the emotion and the response that keeps us safe. It keeps us moving forward in life, but it also can hold us back. There is a wonderful, wonderful book called The Fear Cure. A woman named Dr. Lissa Rankin writes about true fear and false fear. True fear being those things that literally keep us safe, the things that we need to be afraid of in life that keep us safe. But there are also the false fears, the fears that are ruminations, the fears that we're not going to succeed, or the fears that we're an imposter, or the fears that we're not going to be able to handle it, or the fears that somebody is going to pay attention and judge us or reject us. And it's those fears that motivate me. It's those fears that encourage me to share the power of small acts of courage in our lives. That's the critical part. It's not about eradicating fear. It's actually about harnessing fear. It's about dancing with it. It's about paying attention to it in the ways that are meaningful to us, but also not letting it hold us back from the most audacious, vivacious lives that we can lead. I'd like to give you a quick metaphor. Arthur Brooks wrote a great book recently called From Strength to Strength. And he talks about the difference in Western approaches to art and Eastern approaches to art. He talks about walking down a long hallway in an art museum and seeing a sculpture. And you see this beautiful sculpture and the sun is glinting off of it. And you say to yourself, what an incredible work of art. This sculptor was so adept and so powerful in what he or she was creating. And I so appreciate this in the moment. The Eastern approach to art is to think about the block of stone that existed before the sculpture and to realize that the sculpture already existed within that block of stone and that the sculptor's job was to actually chip away at the stone to reveal the sculpture that already exists inside. That is very much how I feel about our own lives. Each one of us, each one of you that has joined today, has this vibrant, passionate, powerful sculpture inside. And over the years, stone has calcified over our sculptures. And that stone was due to past experiences, past traumas, things that people have told us, friends, family members, and that calcifies over this audacious, courageous life that we all have inside of us. And I really do believe that our job, our sacred quest, is to chip away at that stone. And to me, the cudgel, the chisel, is courage. And courage doesn't necessarily mean the big things. You know, I talk to people about courage all day long. And so many people, when I talk about courage, say, that's not me. I'm not courageous. I don't do the big things. And the reality is, it's not about jumping out of airplanes or quitting your job and moving to another city. It's actually the small things. It's having tough conversations. It's being vulnerable. It's being authentic. It's stepping into your power and your creativity. It's about speaking your truth. It's about serving others in ways that push us where we may not know the outcome, but we're going to do it anyway. And once we do that, and the field of positive psychology has so much data and research around this, we take that downward spiral that leads to apathy and depression and feeling stuck, and we start to create an upward spiral of momentum and positivity in our lives. And who doesn't want to lead that life? Who doesn't want to lead a life full of passion and vibrance and pushing through this comfort zone that can exist in all of our lives? So much of the fear response deals with the fact that our bodies want us to be in a state of homeostasis. Our bodies want us to be stable, status quo, safe, same temperature, same life, same routine, because it's safe, right? It keeps us safe. But that doesn't lead to an audacious life. So I was really interested in pursuing, what does it really mean to push out of our comfort zone? What does it really mean in small ways and big to actually push really hard? So with that, first of all, if you have any questions, please throw them in the chat. I would love for this to be a conversation. I know I so wish that we were all together, and I see all your beautiful faces and can feel your energy, but if you have any questions, please, by all means, throw them into the chat, and Caroline can interrupt me. I want this really to be an interactive conversation, but I'd love to share my screen for a minute. I'm going to share just one quick story, and then a few hacks about how to get deeper into our world of courage. All right, hopefully all of you can see. Can all of you see this? Caroline, you're muted.
Yes. And we have
Okay.
one question, which I think you can incorporate into your explanation. How long does it take to create new neural pathways?
It's a great question, and I really view it as a process. It really all depends on how deeply wired those particular memories or issues are for you. Little things just as simple as taking a different path to work, brushing your teeth with your non-dominant hand, small little actions can start to change neural pathways. And very much like a triathlete, somebody who wants to run a triathlon, it is small steps that get you there. You're not going to start out jumping out of the starting blocks and running a triathlon, but day after day, small steps will get you there. And so I think if we view it as a practice, many of you, I'm sure, have a gratitude practice as I do, or a meditation practice. One of my goals in today's talk is to have you consider having a courage practice, which we will get to, I promise. The picture, the woman that you see on your screen is my dear friend, Johanna. Johanna grew up in Beverly Hills. She was a born performer. She is funny. She is wild. She is somebody that you want to be around. And growing up, she loved everything performing. Her dad was an agent and her mom was a writer. And she lived in this world in Los Angeles of entertainers and performers. And she loved every minute of it. And everybody loved Johanna. She used to go to Lakers basketball games with her dad. And while her dad would watch basketball, she loved something else. She loved cheerleaders. Caroline knows this story very well. Johanna loved cheerleaders. She loved their passion. She loved their talent and their athleticism. And she said to herself, I am going to be a cheerleader. At some point in my life, I want to be a cheerleader. Well, she did not, and I want to say this as diplomatically as I can. She would say it less diplomatically. Believe me, if she were with us today, she did not have the body type growing up that was acceptable to become a cheerleader at Beverly Hills High School. And then her parents moved and she went to a high school where there weren't any cheerleaders. And she never was able to be that cheerleader that she had always wanted to be. And when I met Johanna, she was exactly the way she looks in this photo, 53 years old. She had 3 kids. She had recently suffered a bout of lymphoma. And although she was in remission, she was very, very tired. She was working as a nurse and serving patients that were living in horrendous conditions. And she would actually use her meager resources to fund items for the people that she was taking care of. Just a sweet, kind soul, but struggling. And she came to me after I started Scare Your Soul and said to me, I want to do something. I want to push my comfort zone in some way. What should I do? And she thought about it. She had some ideas and she finally came back and she said, you won't believe what I did. I contacted the athletic director of the largest high school in our area. And I asked him if I could be a cheerleader for a day at 53 years old. Of course, she was nervous. She thought she had made the biggest mistake of her life until he called back and said, this is the greatest. We would love to have you. The team has voted unanimously, and we would love for you to be a cheerleader for a day. So she practiced with the squad. She learned all of their cheers and was preparing for the big game. It was actually the homecoming game, the largest game of the year. And she was in the stadium pinning her hair up. She has this incredibly lustrous curly hair. She was pinning it up in a bun and said to herself, what am I doing? What 53-year-old woman puts a uniform on and runs out onto a field with cheerleaders, high school cheerleaders? My kids will be mocked forever. And she decided in that moment to move forward. She decided to move forward into her courage. She ran out onto the field with these 17 and 18-year-old cheerleaders, and she ran all the way out onto the field and turned around to look at the 300 or 400 people that were in the stands, and they all got up and gave her a standing ovation. After she was done, and she had the most incredible experience, fun, lively, powerful, she went and sat in the stands. And there were multiple people who came up to her and said, thank you. Thank you so much for stepping into your courage. It inspired us to do exactly the same. And after the game was over, she went back down and she was about ready to change. And all of the team members asked her if they could take photos with her. This photo is an example of these football players wanting to stand next to her because she had done something so inspirational. And that, I think, is one of the beauties of courage work. It's both individual and it's communal. When we push our comfort zones, when we start to live more audacious, brave lives, we impact people around us, and it's infectious. I just love this photo. And Johanna has stayed a nurse, and she keeps this photo right on her phone. so that whenever she has a moment that she needs to feel a sense of courage, she looks at this photo and remembers that moment of courage. The reason I tell you this story is you have this available to you at any moment. We all have moments where somebody has said to us, you can't do this. We all have it, whether it was me being told that I don't have a voice and being able to sing, or Johanna not being able to be a cheerleader because she didn't have the body style to be a cheerleader and to actually step into that moment of power. We all have it within us. So before I went into all of these kind of strategies, I wanted to tell you the story of Johanna as a bit of an inspiration for you to think about, what is that moment for you? What is something in your past that you feel like is holding you back? And can you have a Johanna moment? Okay, let's move forward and let's dive deeper. Now that we've talked a little bit about fear, a little bit about courage, a little bit about what inspires other people. Oftentimes, as I'm creating Scare Your Soul challenges, we've probably created maybe 300 or 400 different challenges. So I've heard every reaction in the book as people are approaching a moment of discomfort. And in many cases, people will say, I try to avoid things that make me uncomfortable. Can you help me? What's a strategy that can help me not avoid things that make me uncomfortable? Now, this is going to be a little silly, so I want you to be able to take it with some lighthearted nature. I suggest that you create a courage avatar. Now, let me tell you about how this came to me. Many of you will know Margaret Atwood, who is a prolific author. She's written 18 books and 18 books of poetry and graphic novels and children's books. Believe it or not, she was somebody for a very, very long time who was terrified of writing. And she tells wonderful stories about how she got over this fear of writing. And one was to create almost an avatar, a second identity for herself, so that when she needed to be powerful and she needed to step into her writing, she could adopt this avatar, this personality. And so she said that her writer self was Margaret and everything else was Peggy, right? Peggy was the person who did the dishes and who ran errands and led life. But when it came time to actually write, it was Margaret that showed up, which I just loved. So as I was writing this book, I had this concept of creating a courage avatar, a personality that we all have inside of us. And in the book, I talk about creating this avatar. It's actually something that you could draw. And I thought I would share mine with you, my courage avatar. This is my courage avatar. There are all kinds of apps out there in the world that can create avatars for you, or you can, of course, draw your own. But this was my courage avatar, and I created these adjectives, these words that describe the person that I want to be when I want to step into courage. Okay, and I know these things may seem small. You may say to me, "Come on, is this really going to work?" But sometimes these little reminders that we have that, let's go back to that concept of a sculpture. We have that sculpture inside of us. This face, this person is inside of me. It already exists. So when I want to feel powerful and I want to feel courageous, I printed this out and I have it on my desk, and it reminds me to step into that part of myself, which is valiant and bold and courageous. So in the book, I go into chapter and verse about how to do this, but just one little fun hack about where to step in if you avoid things that make you feel uncomfortable. Okay, hack number 2. I can't get past a feeling of anxiety. As many of us, of course, step into those moments of courage in our lives, a tough conversation, sharing a new idea with others, trying something new, whether it's physical or taking a new class, stepping into a room where we don't know anybody. I can't, quote unquote, I can't get past my anxiety. The suggestion that I have is to reframe anxiety as excitement. Now, many of you, of course, will know this concept. There are wonderful studies about this. There's a great professor. Her name is Alison Wood Brooks. She's at Harvard, and she had this great study where she encouraged she has a lab, and she separated a group into three different subgroups. And she asked them all to sing in front of each other a song. It was a song called Don't Stop Believing. Many of you will remember this. It's a band, Journey, 1981. It's a karaoke classic. To sing this song, Don't Stop Believing, in front of the other people in this lab. So you can imagine already, you're probably thinking, if this was me, all these feelings are coming up. What do I do with this? She had one of the groups say, I'm nervous about this, literally out loud. I'm nervous about doing this. She had another group that said, I feel calm. Okay. She's literally telling the group what to say. I feel calm. And the third was, I have some anxiety, but I feel excited. I also feel excited. And the reaction was incredible amounts of positivity and courage as they stepped into it. She tested them and studied them as they were going through this. And then she tested them even 5 and 6 months later, and they were still feeling the after effects of this experience. The whole concept of actually articulating, I'm a bit nervous, but I'm excited too, is a wonderful way to walk in the world. And as you are approaching those moments of discomfort, those moments of stepping into your own power, it's okay to feel nervous. But when you articulate, and especially articulating it out loud, either to yourself or to somebody else, that you're excited too, it really, really helps. So that was another hack or strategy for you from the book. Now, we're entering a phase which is prevalent in just about everybody's life. That is in the Carol Dweck growth mindset life, which is, I feel like a fraud. And I will tell you that this was incredibly powerful for me and relevant for me. I had an editor of the second largest publishing house in the entire world reach out to me after finding my website and ask me if I'd like to write a book. I did not have a book proposal or an agent, which I both had to get and do. But once I started writing this book, I felt like a fraud just about every day. How could I'm not an author. How could I possibly do this? How could I write something that people would want to hear or read or feel is powerful in their own lives? It was an imposter syndrome almost every day. And so I had to come up with a way of really thinking about, how can I deal with this sense of an imposter syndrome? So I researched it. And the truth is, nearly every high-performing person, whether it's an actor or a singer or someone in business or someone in the creative world, feels at some point that they are an imposter, that somebody is going to find out what they're really like. So first of all, I would recommend to you, as most likely you do feel this on occasion, is to realize you're not alone. That's the first step, is to feel that you're not alone, that everybody confronts these feelings and these issues. But I also would like to take it a step forward. In the book, I created something called a brag sheet. And this actually requires a lot of courage because many of us don't like to sing our own praises. We love to sing the praises of other people. We love to promote other people. We love to take care of other people. But it's very, very hard for us. We were either not raised that way or feel that we're bragging, but there is so much power in us reminding ourselves how truly amazing we really are. So in the book, I came up with a list. This is just a few, But and I encourage you, by the way, if you're interested, I am happy to send you all of these materials. I'll send you this PowerPoint presentation. And certainly in the book, there is an expanded version of this brag sheet. But I actually want you to think about the following. In 2022, what did you learn, create, transform, give, inspire, study, win, see, teach, heal? I guarantee you, if you took some time, there were things that you did last year that fulfill all of these categories and more. You are all loving, kind, giving, courageous people. And sometimes it just takes us the opportunity to take a step back and to plug into it and to actually write it out, to write out in front of our own eyes the things that we have done that are so admirable. And in many cases, this is what allows us to take that feeling of imposter syndrome and to not allow it to hold us back from the things that are most important in our lives. Okay. This one also may be something that is relevant to you. I overthink everything. I don't know how to step forward because I overthink everything. I'm ruminating. I'm thinking about future outcomes of what might happen. I came up with, after creating 200 or 300 different challenges and hearing from all of our Scare Your Soul participants, a process called FRAME. And I'll tell you what FRAME exactly is. And I encourage you either to get the book or to go to your library. You can actually write either in the book, or there's a QR code that takes you to an online journal where you can practice the FRAME. But here's really what the FRAME is. And this is for those of you who have a mindfulness practice, this will be very endemic to what you already do. But I have done this dozens and dozens of times with our participants and with my coaching clients. And FRAME, of course, is an acronym that speaks to finding your anchor, relaxing and refining into the moment, accepting your emotions, motivating through an affirmation, and emptying yourself and acting. So let me just give you a flavor of what this is. And if we had a little bit more time, I would take you through this process, but I want to make sure that we have enough time to get through two other strategies and then have time for questions. There is something so powerful about getting grounded in your own physical body, whether that means sitting on a chair and having your feet on the ground, or sitting down on a cushion, or with a couch behind you, but feeling anchored and feeling grounded. First, this is in the context of contemplating a courageous act. The second is just being present in the moment, relaxing, focusing on your breath, and allowing all of your emotions to be present. The third is accepting those emotions. My wonderful mentor, for those of you who know Tal Ben-Shahar, one of his most important ideas is something called the permission to be human, the permission to allow our emotions to flow through us. So to accept those emotions for what they are. They may be anxiety, they may be butterflies in our stomach, they may mean tightness, they may be a sense of I don't know what's going to happen, but allowing those emotions and accepting them. And then affirmations are so positive. And to allow ourselves to choose an affirmation that really means the most to us. The ones that typically speak to me are the following. This is my time. Each time I do this, my courage muscle gets stronger. I have the power to push past my barriers. I am uniquely prepared to do this. And to allow that affirmation to sink in and to really feel that affirmation is guiding you. And then finally, emptying, letting go of the affirmation and moving into action, moving into a creative, courageous act. So that is the frame. That is and this can be done just about anywhere. It could be done, at a coffee shop. It could be done in your home. It could be done almost anywhere. And it really, really makes a difference. I don't know how to start. I would say that this is probably the number one question. I just don't know where to start. I want a more courageous life, and I just don't know where to start. And I'd like to tell you just a quick story. When I graduated from college, I had led the life that I had told you earlier in our conversation today. Very, very small, very scared, nearly invisible. And I graduated from Skidmore College with an English degree, with no job, no plan. And I was working in a record store, and really felt at that point that this was just about all that life was going to give me. And someone offered me an opportunity. The opportunity was to teach English to Holocaust survivors in Israel, which would require me to get on a plane, fly to a place I had never been, live with a family that I did not know, speak a language that at that point I did not know. And everything inside of me said, I can't do it. But there was some spark. There was a moment where I decided to step into my courage, and I said yes. So I packed up my backpack. I said goodbye to my parents, gave them a big hug, and I flew from Cleveland to JFK on my way to Israel. And I bought a little spiral notebook when I was in the concourse waiting to get on the flight. And I got on the flight from JFK to Ben Gurion Airport, and the doors closed and the plane took off, and I had a panic attack. I thought to myself, there is no way I can do this. I'm going to fail. I don't have the strength for this or the courage. And I remember the sweat coming down and my heart beating. And I pulled out that little spiral notebook that was in my backpack, and I put it on the tray table in front of me, and I grabbed a pen, and it literally unconsciously came through me. It was 8 words that I wrote out into that notebook. Do one thing every day that scares you. Do one thing every day that scares you. It is a phrase that I'm sure you know. It is often attributed to Eleanor Roosevelt, although you can go back to the Stoics and earlier, the concept of leading a life where we find one thing every day that scares us. And I will tell you that this mantra has made all of the difference in my life. When I was in Israel, I chose to do one thing every day that scared me. It started out small, but each time I did it, that could have meant going to the post office or speaking to somebody in a different language, but I wrote it down in that spiral notebook. Every single day, one thing that scared me, one way that I stepped out of my comfort zone. And that year changed my life. I've been on a path ever since where I now continue to find one thing every day that scares me. And my encouragement to you is that this does not have to be big. It does not have to be monumental. It just has to be daily. It's just like a meditation practice or a gratitude practice or a running practice or an exercise practice. It is something that when you decide that you are going to push your comfort zone and you do it every single day, it makes all the difference in the world. And so my encouragement to you as you are moving into this new area of your life where you are starting to really live that internal sculpture, that beautiful, vivacious, powerful person inside of you, that it doesn't have to be big. You don't have to run the marathon. All you have to do is get out the front door. And to me, all of these strategies that we've talked about in the call today, they're all helpful. They really are. And some may resonate more than others. The book itself is full of writing prompts and challenges and ways for you to interact with your world. But my main suggestion that I implore you to consider is, can you find one small moment every day to step out of your comfort zone that builds the muscle, that changes your internal sense of yourself? It bolsters your identity that you're a courageous person, which you already are, and you start living the life that we all deserve, which is bold, audacious, and full of courage. So with that, and 3 minutes left.
Yeah, we have some questions.
So
Yeah.
I want to
Scott,
thank you all so much. I'm happy to
yeah.
answer any questions that you have.
Scott, amazing. I really encourage everybody to get the book. I have the book myself. I have a Scare Yourself Every Day. I mean, do one thing courageous every day. Practice. I'm teasing. And it has made a difference. And I guess what I want to say about that, Scott, is that really even speaking up sometimes can be enough. Like, it's just acknowledging what you're afraid of doing. We do things that we're afraid of all the time, but sometimes we don't really acknowledge it and give ourselves credit. Here's some of the questions. My senior neighbor fears going out of the house because navigating the stairs. What strategy do you suggest?
Great question. So again, I think this falls into the category of what fears keep us safe and what fears are holding us back. So I think when it comes to things that deal with physical safety, we need to be mindful of the things that are keeping us safe. And there are real reasons to mind that very important reaction within us. I would say that the key is, are there other, maybe non-physical, let's leave aside, can we walk down the stairs? Can this person begin to start acting in small, courageous ways that maybe don't have to do with a flight of stairs? Maybe it has to do with picking up the phone and calling a loved one that they haven't talked to in a while, or calling their doctor and having the conversation that they need to have with their doctor about their medication. Maybe it's starting an online class or creating a hobby that they haven't before. I think it is those small steps that all of a sudden start to bolster who we are that can then start to lead to, well, gosh, I can do those stairs. I'm doing all of these new things in my life. I think or maybe it's a different way out of the house. Or maybe, this is important, asking for help. Maybe the courageous thing is to say, I'm going to call my friend over and that person can help me down the stairs. I don't have to lead this life alone. I can actually ask for help, which sometimes is the most courageous act.
And I think you're talking about scaffolding, right? So
Totally.
Making things smaller steps and smaller steps leading to a bigger and larger action. Here's another thing. Overcoming fear can mean not being afraid of the consequences or of the action. Can you talk about that? It's not that we're not afraid of the consequences or the actions, right?
Absolutely. I'm so glad that this question was asked. And I almost want to kind of bring a little bit of a kind of a Buddhist mindset here. And that is, when we are attached to outcome, we act with the quid pro quo that our courageous act is going to end up in an outcome that we think that we want. And my suggestion is to say to yourself, I'm not going to focus on outcome. And I'll give you a rationale in just 1 second, but that the focus indeed should be on the action, not the outcome. I oftentimes say action is the antidote, that actually stepping into that moment is the important part, and the outcome is less important because, and I'll just give you a quick example. When I got divorced in my mid-30s, I thought my life was over. I thought everything that was going well was now ruined. And I thought this was it for me. I will tell you now that experience, first of all, created a spiritual path and a path through positive psychology that I never would have had otherwise. My ex-wife is now my closest friend in the entire world, and I have the most incredible co-parenting relationship with her. And the moment that I thought that the outcome was the furthest from what I would want actually ended up being the greatest gift. So if you look back at your life, and I actually deal with this a lot in the book, there are those moments where we think we want X, but really, if we just allowed the universe or God or fate or destiny to just allow us to say, you know what, I'm not going to focus on the outcome. I'm just going to focus on the act. Then we start stepping in. And I will tell you, if you think about all the things that are holding you back right now, whether it's small things that are like procrastinations or big things like me, where I didn't sing for 35 years and it required me to go sing in front of a busy restaurant, think about the beauty and connection and love that falls on the other side of that. That when you step into action, we don't know what's going to happen. We may fail. We may have an outcome that we didn't expect. We may have the outcome that we thought we expected and we wanted. But you're going to achieve a level of adventure, of awe, of connection with other people, with creativity. And to me, that's so beautiful. We don't know what's on the other side of the garden wall until we take the leap. So focus less on outcome, more on action.
One last question, because I think it's an important one, and it's a tricky one to tease out. Judy was saying one needs to rid oneself of negative self-talk, turn it around to the positive, and there can be many Johanna moments. But is that actually true? Is it that we want to rid ourselves of negative self-talk? Can we, in fact, rid ourselves of anything? Or do we want to just turn the volume down and turn the volume up? Because, you know, especially in positive psychology, we have to acknowledge the truth of what it is. And resilience, right, is being able to say, okay, this really is, I am afraid and I'm also excited. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. I'll use a very simple metaphor. If you are a runner and you decide that you really want to set a goal of running a marathon, there will be hard days. There'll be easy days. The key is getting out and running and building the muscle, the stamina to be able to do what you are setting out to do. A human life is full of ups, downs, joys, tragedies, curveballs, every day. And certainly in the sweep of life, there are. And so ridding ourselves of anything, I think, is it's a dangerous proposition, because we really can't rid ourselves of powerful primal emotions. Negative self-talk, and this is a whole nother podcast unto itself. We could talk about negativity bias and how actually the negativity bias is there to protect us. We always think about the negativity bias as this terrible part of the human condition. It's actually there, just like fear is there to protect us, so does the negativity bias. So to pretend that it's not going to exist, or to pretend that we're not going to have thoughts and feelings, is to deny the beauty and the friction and the tension of the human experience. I don't want that. I don't want a life devoid of that. But what I do want is a life of being present, of feeling those emotions, understanding them, reveling in them when I can, dancing with them when I can. And if I can't, at least not letting them stop me from leading my life. So I have all kinds of things happening in my life that are challenging. I have two parents now that are going through tremendous health struggles. Should I smile my way through it and say this isn't existing? No, but I want to be present with them. I want to be courageous in my openness of what is happening. I don't want to deny myself the reality of the pain and struggle, but at the same time, I also don't want to deny myself the ability to love and to feel like I can step into that moment with my full self. And to me, that's courage. That's the courage of leading a human life. So I wish I could say, yes, the self-talk will go away. You're never going to see it again. The truth is, you're going to see it all the time, but I want you to dance with it. I don't want you to deny it.
Oh my gosh, it really is a dance, isn't it? You're talking my language as a mover and a dancer and a NIA instructor. So I could talk with you forever, Scott. And every time that we talk, we have more to talk about.
We do, don't we?
Right, we really do. And I thought what Deborah said was fabulous presentation. I realized I am more courageous than I give myself credit for. What a gift. And I bet that that's true. I would love for everybody on our Zoom Unity, our Positive Psychology Hour, to raise your hand because you are more courageous than you give yourself credit for. And showing up today was a courageous act. And I think that that's what helps us move forward, right, Scott, and keep going, is when we have that positive emotion and when we have that, that acknowledgement. It's like Kristen Neff's work, right? Compassion actually breeds self-compassion, productivity, right? It makes us want to get in the game and keep going. Any final words for us, Scott?
Just to remember your sculpture, that there is this pure, energetic sculpture inside of you that wants to experience everything that life has to offer. And that with small acts of courage, not the big things, but the small acts of courage every day, you are chipping away at that stone and revealing that sculpture inside of you. That's my greatest wish for all of you. And I want you to do it because you inspire me and you inspire your families and you inspire your communities. And that means we all live in a better world. This is something that we're all in together. So thank you all so much. It was really an honor and a pleasure to be with all of you.
Scott, would you do us a favor? Because I know there's a lot of people that want to know how to get in touch with you and also about your book. If you send me your slide deck and if you can include like where they can get the book and also where they can get a hold of you and where they can join the Scare Your Soul Challenge, I think that would be amazing. Yes, everybody, I see some hands up. Okay.
Oh, thank you all. Scare Your Soul is always free. It will always be free. If you go to scareyoursoul.com, you can sign up to be a Soulster. That's what we call our participants. That means that you get a weekly challenge. They're all written by me. I share a very vulnerable perspective every single Wednesday. Something from my life. I bring in research and data and then offer you a challenge for the week for you to think about. And if you want to do it and share it with others, that's great. The book is on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and at your independent local bookstores. It is called Scare Your Soul. I have a copy of it right here.
I have one. I recommend it.
It is honestly, I'm very proud of it. And I get emails every single day from people who are doing unbelievable things just by the very nature that they're taking small steps forward. So for those of you who do purchase a copy, I thank you from my heart. It is it's my love letter to all of you. And so yeah, scareyoursoul.com, and you can find out more information about the book on the website as well.
Thank you, everybody. I will send you out the recording and Scott's slide deck, so you can have that. And just to let you know that next week we have Julia Mines coming back to talk about humor and play. And then February is all lined up. Kelly McGonigal's coming back. If you haven't had a chance to hear her talk, Melissa, on February 7th, Melissa Johnson-Carissimo will be with us on Valentine's Day. Then Michael Steger is going to be in the house talking about meaning. And then the very own Phoebe Atkinson will be back at the end of the month to talk to us about stress and how to mitigate that with Spire. All right, everyone, please take care of yourself. Scott, thank you so much. Thank you for telling us how to improve our courage muscles and by small acts of bravery and doing things that scare us just a little bit. We'll see you next time. Take care.
Bye-bye.